Thank you, John, for doing this. All through the COVID experience, tragedy, I had this kind of recurring question in my mind, which is, no one's ever answered. And I think that you have gotten to the answer or close to the answer. And the question is this: why were public health authorities in the United States and acting in concert with the media so intent on discouraging Americans from treating COVID? There was this persistent and very aggressive and at times really vicious campaign to get people to stop thinking about how to treat this illness, which we were told was going to wipe out a huge percentage of humanity, and just to accept the vax. But no treatment at all, because that's fish tank cleaner, it's horse tranquilizer. What was that? And I'm going to stand back and let you tell the story. What was that?
Well, the short answer is that it was to stamp out the heresy of what is called vaccine hesitation. So vaccine hesitation, there's a huge literature on it. It's a psychological analysis of all of the factors that would cause anyone, a man, a woman, a young person, to hesitate to get the vaccine. And I want to emphasize this. You Google vaccine hesitancy, you're going to get 1 million search results. So what is vaccine hesitancy? And I think it's best understood not so much in scientific terms, not in empirical scientific terms. It's a form of heresy. And this was the thing that my co-author, Dr. Peter McCullough, and we had conversations about this for the last 5 years. Why is it heresy? And conversely, why is the vaccine a kind of, in the minds of so many people, something like a savior? Well, a liberator and a savior. And I hope I'm not out of line by showing you this on the cover of the book. I know this kind of sounds like plugging the book, but there's a reason for this. That, do you know what that is?
I don't.
That is a 20 euro silver coin issued by the Vatican in the year 2022, commemorating the COVID-19 vaccine, specifically the messenger RNA vaccine.
Actually?
Mm-hmm. And you will observe the traditional Catholic iconography, the three, the Trinity. You could go into, for example, the Art History Museum in Vienna. There's a Raphael painting, Madonna of the Meadow, and it's this tripartite figures. I think in Madonna in the Meadow, it's the Virgin Mary, Christ, and John the Baptist. So that three, and then here you have the cross. When somebody looks at that, particularly if they're Roman Catholic, they immediately have all of the iconography and all the feelings and thoughts.
That's the most resonant image possible.
For sure. So if you look at the Numista catalog, the coin catalog for the Vatican, it issues different metals and coins and so forth. It is described as a boy prepares to receive the vaccine.
Not really.
A boy prepares to receive the vaccine.
This is his first vaccine. Sorry, excuse me.
You got it.
Yeah.
I mean, the grammar, the number of words, it's identical. A boy prepares to receive the Eucharist. So what Francis did with this, and I don't know if he's the guy making the decisions, is let's take the existing religious iconography, the idea of Christ the Savior, the one that will protect you or at least your soul, and how are we supposed to interpret this other than, well, it's the vaccine that's the Savior. So I saw that and I thought, well, that's rather remarkable. I wonder if there are any other indications of this overlaying vaccine iconography on top of existing religious iconography. And I just started finding them everywhere.
Really? Well, there's that famous, not famous enough, but still famous Diego Rivera mural that I believe hangs in Detroit, painted
Correct.
in the 30s, which presents the vaccine as a kind of Eucharist.
Right. In that iteration, I think that's a funny painting, by the way. I'm glad that you mentioned that. In that iteration, it would seem that the central figure is the Virgin Mary. She has the sort of Christ child like in a manger. There are these different animals around the manger like the Nativity. What he's actually doing with that is the different animals around the nativity scene. There's a horse, there's a cow, I think there's a goat. That's, in the way it's described, is a reference to the serum that back in those days, I think this was in the 30s.
Yes.
That's a reference to the serum that is, for example, extracted from horses with diphtheria. The cow is obviously smallpox. So it's taking the nativity scene and it's making it a celebration of this great human achievement. But they're everywhere. So
really,
this kind of iconography, I mean, it's a big world and there's a lot of images, obviously. But we found a church in South Africa, and I think it's a Roman Catholic church. It might be a Church of England, but I think I should remember this. But there's a huge banner hanging from the facade that said, "Even the blood of Christ cannot protect you. Get vaccinated." And what's interesting about this, it shows
for real.
For real.
Speaking of heresy,
in the subliminal quality of this piece of propaganda is remarkable because blood, it's all black block script except for the word blood. It's blood red, and then the word vaccine, the script is in blood red. So you see the equivalence, but it's not really an equivalence. There's the association of equivalence, but in fact the vaccine is more effective than the blood of Christ in protecting the beneficiary. So what is this? This is...
Well, it's shocking. I didn't know any of this.
Yeah, it is shocking.
Are there churches in the United States that have spread this idea?
Well, I've not seen anything quite that crass, that extreme. And of course, this is, the context. It's South Africa. Somebody at that church seems to think you have to hit people with a sledgehammer in order to get them to overcome their vaccine hesitancy. But one of the things that Dr. McCullough and I discovered was very alarming, that the so-called Biden administration is called I believe it was called the COVID Vaccine Corps, which dispersed billions of dollars to various recipients. The major sports leagues, the NFL, I think Major League Baseball, they received just an outright bribe. I don't see how else you can characterize this. It's just Uncle Sam is going to give you a bunch of dough and you're going to basically force this on your league. And there's a reason for that we will get into. But also the mainline Episcopal, Protestant, evangelical churches, Roman Catholic churches, all of their clergy received money to, I don't know how else to put it, push the vaccine. And there were very few pastors or priests or rectors, what was it in the Episcopal church? Rectors, who refused. And,
but how, I mean, that right there strikes me as a violation, well, of the First Amendment, which prohibits state religion, but also of their duties as Christian leaders. You can't take money from the government to push something like that. I mean, I don't understand. Are these people still in leadership? It was only 5 years ago.
I mean, I would, you're asking questions now that Peter and I have been asking for 5 years. And we've been profoundly puzzled by this. It's very confounding. And, ultimately, well, I want to mention the NFL as well, and then the tennis league, the professional tennis league as well. So Aaron Rodgers, the Green Bay Packers quarterback, he goes on to Joe Rogan, and he describes this sort of struggle session that the NFL, the management, the administrators of the Green Bay Packers put him through. Extreme isolation, shaming. I don't know if you saw the interview, but he's this kind of good-natured, tough guy who's just sort of speaking in a matter-of-fact way with Joe Rogan. And I began to realize whether Aaron Rodgers conceptualized this way or not, it's very apparent. He was perceived as being guilty of heresy. It's like, the most obvious example of this is like Martin Luther in Germany. It's like I think he was a Dominican or an Augustinian friar, I can't remember which order, but he posts his theses on the door of the castle church in Wittenberg, and it's like the game is on. Okay, you just committed heresy. You know the story. The Holy Office, the Pope himself, excommunicates him, and there's sort of no hope for him. In the case of Aaron Rodgers, I believe it's the same psychology. You're a very prominent person. Now, in the case of Martin Luther, he's hanging around with, I think, a Saxon duke. You can't do this. If you do this, because now people are looking up to you, if you commit heresy and you get away with it, the whole stamping out of vaccine hesitancy will be imperiled. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense.
So this just under the thumb, just make your life as miserable as possible.
Everything serves the imperative.
The imperative.
Which is the way organizations work. They all have an imperative. Usually the imperative is self-preservation, expansion, accumulation of power, whatever. But whatever the imperative is, whatever the goal is, everything is subservient to that. That's how people are. That's how organizations are. It doesn't answer the question, why is giving people the vaccine the only thing that matters? I think that's, and I'm jumping so far ahead in the story, and I hope that you can shed some light on that question, but it all goes back to the fact that public health authorities, political leadership, clergy, everyone with any power at all in the West, not just the United States, decided the only thing that matters is getting this needle into the arms of our populations. That's it.
That was it.
But why?
Well, let's start.
Yeah, sorry, I said I would shut up. I'm not.
Well, this Christmas, give the gift of sleep with 8 Sleep. Everybody needs good rest for most of their days, but few know how to actually get it. 8 Sleep's Pod 5 is the answer to that. Pod 5 is a smart mattress that automatically regulates your body temperature throughout the night. It's proven to deliver up to an extra hour of good sound sleep every single night. That will change your life if you get it. Plenty of people on our staff use the Pod 5 and they are very psyched. That's why they're so focused and well rested. I can see them humming around right now. The full body feeling of comfort, that's what keeps you in the sack and fully crashed out. We recommend it strongly. So we are all in an 8 Sleep. As we've told you, they've extended their biggest sale of the year. Use the code Tucker at this address, 8sleep.com, EIGHT, sleep.com/Tucker for $400 off the Pod 5 Ultra. And there's a reason 8 Sleep has won the Men's Health Sleep Award, the coveted Sleep Award, because it's awesome. 8sleep.com/Tucker.
Let's start with the Annunciation.
Yes.
Okay. So the Annunciation happened in April of 2020. So Bill Gates makes the rounds, CNN, MSNBC. So call it the angel Gabriel. He makes the Annunciation. He says, the world is all, turned on its head, and we're going to have a hard time going back to normal, and the economy is, a mess. And so it's a kind of depiction of the wasteland, fertility, the happiness of the kingdom. It's all just going straight to hell. The only way we're going to be able to go back to normal is basically when essentially everybody on the planet gets the vaccine. Okay, so I hope I'm not pressing on this metaphor too far, but the Annunciation. So all is bleak, the world is a mess, normalcy has been completely turned on its head. We can only go back to normal. He actually uses that phrase. We can only go back to normal when everyone gets the vaccine. Well, remember, this is April of 2020. The clinical trial for the Moderna vaccine, which Moderna had developed with the NIH, with Anthony Fauci's NIH, it had just gone into human trials. I say just, it actually went into human trials very quickly. We can talk about that as well. But how does Mr. Gates already know in April that this is going to come quickly enough? Usually takes years to develop a new vaccine. Quickly enough, and that it will be safe, and that it will be effective. Well, the answer is he already knew it was a fait accompli. It was a foregone conclusion. It's coming quickly, and when everybody gets it, then and only then will we be able to go back to normal. So consider all of the assumptions in this proposition. It's just perfectly astonishing. The Department of Defense and Health and Human Services in July of 2020, they say, well, we've already inked the contract. We've already signed the contract to purchase, I can't remember how many 100 million doses of Pfizer-BioNTech's vaccine. And you think, you've already written it's not, we don't have it yet. It's not been developed fully. Human trials for phase 2 haven't even commenced. This is a fait accompli. It's already been decided, and it's already been decided by the second richest man in the world that everybody's going to get it. So it's done. It's a done deal. So when Dr. Peter McCullough writes an editorial in The Hill in August of 2020 saying, this is just a big gamble. Our public health authorities, our military, our health and human services, they've all decided that this is coming, but it's a complete gamble. This is a new technology. It's a genetic technology. We don't know the long-term effects. We don't know how it's going to affect children. This is a gamble. And what happened to McCullough when he started talking this way? Same thing with Aaron Rodgers. Relentless persecution. Relentless. Fired from his job at a major university hospital. Sued. All of his editorships of various academic journals pulled. His professorships pulled. Just canceled, annihilated, sued, encumbered with attorneys, the whole thing. So you're probably asking, okay, where is all of this going? Let me just give you one more example to make my point. I think professional athletes are considered, particularly in the eyes of young men who are potentially the most dangerous people to those in power. Like if the young guys kind of get together and say we're not putting up with this, then we've really got a problem because they're harder to control. So I think the attitude of professional sportsmen is of particular interest. So Novak Djokovic has recovered from COVID-19. He had the illness. It was symptomatic. PCR confirmed. He's done. He got through it. It's not surprising that a man of his physical conditioning got through it without a problem, but he's done. His body has been infected. His immune system has mounted a response. It's overcome the infectious agent, and he's recovered. There's no better immunity than that. I mean, if you want to understand how vaccines work in theory and in practice, it is to induce the body's immune system or stimulate the body's immune system to respond to an invading microorganism. So there's no better vaccine than actually getting through the illness. Why do we have vaccines? The thought going back to Jenner is there are diseases which are extremely dangerous, which could cause horrible disease and mortality. The idea of a vaccine is induce natural immunity without putting the recipient through the trials and the danger and possible death that he would experience if he just got the bug. Okay, does that make sense?
Of course it does.
So this proclamation, vaccine immunity for COVID-19, it's better than natural immunity. That is prima facie totally preposterous and absurd. No one that's ever spent any time studying immunology would believe that for 1 second.
So no epidemiologist could believe that.
No immunologist. Well, how could you? I mean, it just, on the face of it, is totally preposterous. But this is what we were told. Now, it's very interesting because I immediately perceived this just from reading a textbook of immunology. So I knew, like, this is, on the face of it, insane. It's only been in the last few weeks. I mean the last few weeks. Here we are kind of getting...
In 2025?
In 2025. That Sanjay Gupta and Paul Offit, who's a very prominent vaccinologist, have made the rounds and said, you know something, that really wasn't correct to smear natural immunity in the case of COVID-19. That technically wasn't true.
How could those men still have jobs in medicine?
If you watch this show, you know that we love Pure Talk. It is amazing wireless service with absolutely the best prices. And all the time we've been telling you about Pure Talk, we've never seen an offer like the one we're about to describe. And here it is. Unlimited talk, text, data with a 30 gig hotspot for just $29.95 per month. Not just this month, every month for life. This is Pure Talk's top tier plan, $29.95 a month. You'll save over 50% a month every month for your entire life. And you stay in the exact same 5G network that Verizon and AT&T offer, but for $1,600 a year cheaper for a family of four. That's wild. It's provable, by the way. This isn't some false claim. It's not disinformation. It's real. Pure Talk's customer service, meanwhile, is located in the United States, not in Bangladesh. Nothing against Bangladesh, but you're talking to Americans you can understand. They can switch you in just minutes. You keep your phone, keep your number, and you start saving in a really big way. Unlimited for life, $29.95 a month. This is a short-term offer. Long-term consequences, short-term offer. puretalk.com/Tucker to switch today. puretalk.com/Tucker to switch to America's wireless. Pure Talk. Taxes and fees not included. Go to the site to get all the details, but those are the basics.
I don't know. That's, to me, it's really, these are social questions. It's questions about the system in which we live. How could you defend a system that allows that level of dishonesty and levies no penalty against people who promote lies? I just don't understand that.
Because the factual truth of the matter is secondary, perhaps even tertiary, is secondary, perhaps even a distant third place to the orthodoxy, to maintaining the orthodoxy.
Right.
And what I want to, so I'm telling you this story. I mean, realizing this is something that came about through, we're now 5 years into this. years of reflection and conversation and debate with my co-author, Dr. Peter McCullough. And so the question is, could it be that we're constantly being told, follow the science? Science is the thing that governs rational decision making. We're always being told that. But I think the big realization is most human affairs and decision making, it's actually not outside of something like Newtonian mechanics, like the weights and balances on an aircraft or engineering a building, or all of the things in which mechanical forces can be measured and engineered in accordance with the force that's being exerted on it. Apart from, let's keep it simple, Newtonian mechanics, there's so much in human existence, the way the body works, the mysteries of why do some people get sick, why do some people don't, why do some people live longer than others? All of these questions, we call it medical science, but in fact, it is so multifactorial. There are so many different known and unknown factors at play that none of this can be measured. So what the medical mind has done is, I think perhaps without even being fully conscious of it, it's basically adopted orthodoxies, a doctrinal view of medicine. And if you look at the history,
Can I just ask you to pause? I hope that people watching this, if they didn't fully understand what you just said, will rewind it and listen to that again. That's the best explanation I've ever heard for what's gone wrong. What you just said right there.
One starts with presuppositions, and then that's how you interpret the world. Your interpretive framework begins with your presuppositions, and that's how you actually view the world. Now, my formal training was in philosophy, and this was, I won't bore the audience with rehashing academic philosophical debate, but there was a very, very big debate in the 18th century between what philosophers called empiricism. The
Yes.
foremost representative of this was David Hume, and then rationalism, the foremost representative being René Descartes. So Immanuel Kant, this sort of unusually scholarly guy living in Königsberg, Germany, which back then was part of Prussia. It was actually a Hansa city, a free city in the Hanseatic League. Very, very thoughtful, contemplative guy. Apparently that's kind of all he did was contemplate. And he came to the conclusion, which he presented in a book called The Critique of Pure Reason, that in fact it's a combination of both. In order to interpret the world, to make any sense of it at all, it's true that we have sensory data coming in, and you can pay attention to it and observe patterns, but you can't really interpret it unless you have certain categories that are already in your mind.
Exactly. This was our breakfast conversation this morning, and it has such effects on the way we live and understand things.
It does, and so we live in a world now in which I think an increasing number of Americans, of our citizenry, those who are awake and have some sense that paying attention, if they're paying attention, if they have been paying attention for the last few years, and COVID-19 is an interesting story because I think what happened with COVID-19, much of the fraud that was presented to us was so extreme and so crass that Kant talked about reading David Hume. He said, it awakened me from my dogmatic slumber. And I like that phrase. It's like people began to think, our government is acting so weird. And people with any familiarity, for example, with immunology, I hope I can say something slightly vulgar, they're thinking, this is such colossal bullshit that Like, what is the government doing?
Right.
What is this weird priesthood of vaccinologists telling us? It just can't be true. So I think that awakened a lot of people from their dogmatic slumber about our institutions. And now we're in this weird moment where a lot of American people have started to view the U.S. government in a way that a wife with a philandering husband might start to view his representations. Like, she's caught him 10 times running around on her. He swears up and down that he's seen the light, that he tells the truth, that, he's sworn off the girls. But at that point, even if he has sworn off the girls, the trust has been totally demolished.
Right.
So we're in a weird, very unhappy moment right now, in which
Well put.
In which
Weird and unhappy. That's exactly right.
In which we just don't believe anything that our institutions tell us, and I don't rejoice at that. I don't see how this republic is going to survive if we don't have some faith in our institutions.
I agree completely.
But the question is, how can it be won back? Anyway, that's another question. Vaccines, like other things that we've seen in medical history, are now an object of orthodoxy. And you go to medical school, you read your textbooks, you attend your lectures, and you are told, this is the reality of this product, of this technology, and that's it. It's axiomatic. There's no questioning it. There's no examining it. There's no critically evaluating it. There's no even going back just to ask, well, is it optimized? I mean, so a car manufacturer could say, well, it's axiomatic that a car has to have functioning brakes. And you say, well, are they optimized brakes? Are the materials, is the calipers, is all of that the best brakes that we could put on a car to make sure that a good reaction time, the driver's not drunk. If he hits the brakes, the car is going to stop. Are they the best brakes? Well, you can't ask that about vaccines. You can't say, well, some of these vaccines, they go back to the 1930s when they were developed. Are they optimized? You can't even ask that. So what is that telling us? The other thing is, don't ask any questions, and observe that since 1986, the vaccine manufacturers have received full liability immunity in the event that their products injure or kill.
Christmas season is here, and although it's a bit of a cliche, it really is important to keep Christ in Christmas. Should we focus on cookies and presents or on the reason we're doing this, which is Jesus? Obviously, the point is Jesus. That's the whole point. That's the only point. And all of the decency and good cheer of this holiday comes from Jesus. The Hallow App's Pray 25 Challenge reminds us of that. It features Chris Pratt, Gwen Stefani, our friend Jonathan Rumi, and many others. This 25-day challenge guides you through Advent and helps you keep your focus on the true reason for the season, Jesus. Experience the nativity story where Jesus brought peace and calm to a world in chaos. And that's exactly what we need right now, is peace and calm and still. And Jesus is the only one who brings it, period. Hallow is thousands of prayers and meditations and music to help you connect with God all through Christmas and after, including several Christmas original songs and albums. There's a whole world on Hallow. It's like unbelievable. It's changed our family's life. Check it out. You will not regret it. Get 3 months for free at hallow.com/Tucker. Experience greater peace and stillness this Christmas.
So this is a very notable moment in this story that I found rather stunning. So that 1986 Vaccine Injury Act was questioned in court. The case was Brusewitz versus Wyeth. There was a girl who was badly injured. I believe it was a pertussis vaccine. Developed encephalitis, severe brain damage, basically destroyed the child for the rest of her life. So the parents sue Wyeth, which had in the interim been acquired by, I'm not going to say who they'd been acquired by. I don't want to risk saying the wrong. But Wyeth had been acquired by one of the major pharmaceutical companies. The case was Brusewitz versus Wyeth, and the question was, and it went to the Supreme Court, is the liability protection provided by the 1986 Vaccine Injury Act, Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, is that constitutional? So the court ruled in favor of Wyeth, and Mr. and Mrs. Brusewitz were told, sorry, there's nothing that can be done. The act is upheld. But there was a dissenting justice. It was Justice Sotomayor. And she wrote a dissenting opinion. And it's an excellently reasoned dissenting opinion. It shows how far the liberal mind has come since 2010. She writes the most reasonable, sensible dissenting view of vaccines. And what she says is liability, product liability, being subject to tort litigation, is the primary incentive for optimizing the safety and the efficacy of the product. If you just tell somebody, oh, looks great, it's been around for 30 years, cool, everyone has to get it, zero liability. What is the human nature being what it is? What's the incentive to improve it?
Well, there isn't any.
None. I mean, what are we to expect the CEO of Pfizer, which has a very long civil and criminal rap sheet for fraud, for concealing bad safety data, for overstating efficacy? Are we to believe that suddenly the corporate board of Pfizer is going to develop such a strong, conscientious approach to business that they're just going to say, well, we don't have any liability, but I think we ought to just get busy optimizing it anyway. It's not a realistic.
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, people respond to the systems in which they live and work. So I'm not even blaming Pfizer, though. Obviously I'm opposed to Pfizer on every level, but it's not Pfizer's fault that's the law passed by Congress.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, this is our story. We started off, a first phase of this was something that hit Dr. McCullough so hard. And there's an interesting coincidence here. I had heard about him. I had heard about his Senate testimony on November the 19th, 2020. A very good man, Senator Ron Johnson, organized Senate testimony, a Senate hearing to discuss the question of early treatment. Is there anything with a good safety profile that could possibly help to keep people from falling badly ill, going to hospital, and possibly dying in hospital? That's what doctors do. Is there anything that we could do to help? Now, the first principle is safety, but what these guys were looking at were FDA-approved drugs with some of the best safety profiles, in the business. Hydroxychloroquine, it was FDA-approved in 1956. There's a wide range of indications for it. The most common one in the States for decades was rheumatoid arthritis. People had taken hydroxychloroquine against rheumatoid arthritis for a decade, and suddenly we're told that it's dangerous. So it was actually the eye doctors, the retina doctors, that first recognized that's not true. Because one of the things that retina doctors have to look out for is if someone has been taking hydroxychloroquine every day for over a decade for treating rheumatoid arthritis, sometimes retinal doctors will see a toxicity that starts to affect the retina. Okay, every day for over 10 years. We're talking a 5-day course of hydroxychloroquine. So this is, again, this is absurd. And one of the things that I think you've talked about, you've touched on in your other programs, is a tyrant will often and where tyranny comes from in the human mind and how it develops and takes over institutions is a subject we could discuss. But one of the things the tyrant does is insists on total absurdities. And what happens to the people is they either accept that it's patently ridiculous, or they become so demoralized that the government is making this assertion that they just give up. It's like, okay, I guess I'm just going to have to tune all of this out and, go surfing in Mexico or something. Like, just forget it. And I think that that's actually intentional. So I don't really like partisan politics, but remember that this is happening during the Biden administration when the first vaccine mandates get underway. So you look at the Biden administration, and starting with the president himself, I mean, we're told that he's sharp as a tack. So either you come to accept that and you think, well, I guess he's sharp as a tack. I guess. I mean, that's what we're being told. Or you're so demoralized by that monstrous absurdity that you just say, I guess we're done. I mean, I guess the republic is finished. That there are people apparently behind the scenes pulling the strings, the marionettes that run the show. I don't know who the hell they are. I don't need to run afoul of them, so I'm done. I'm checking out. And I think this vaccine ideology and religion that has been erected, it's a species of this just demoralizing anybody that asks questions. We're going to eliminate the inquisitive mind from the public forum.
And it's also, I agree with everything you're saying, and I think it's profound. It's not just on display during COVID. It's just like a feature of tyranny, always and everywhere. It's the basis of the novel 1984. But I think it's also worth saying that when you participate in these humiliation rituals and when you go along with it, you change. There's something about you that dies.
For sure.
You are diminished, and you hope it's not permanent, but it seems to be. But whatever, permanent or not, it's absolutely real. And people who went along with that are different people.
Well, this takes us to the big theme. So I did want to quickly mention Djokovic just to give you an even more luminous illustration of this. So he gets through COVID. It's PCR confirmed. He's fine. The Australian authorities give him the green light. They say, you can get on a plane and fly across the Pacific to Sydney to participate in the 2022 Australian Open. Okay, well, you've flown to Australia. I mean, it's not exactly the most pleasant experience, even if you're in first class.
It's very long.
It's so long, and you're going through all of these time zones, and your internal clock is turned on its head. And I mean, it's kind of a rough voyage. It's not what Captain Cook went through, but
yeah,
it's it kind of sucks. So just consider the psychology of this. You're a professional tennis player. You've been given the green light. Because you're COVID recovered, you can compete. And you had to go through a bunch of hurly-burly in order to get to that point. You get on the plane, you relax, you take a deep breath, you start thinking about your game. Like, what are you going to do when you get to Sydney? Who are you competing against? And this is what's running through your mind. You then arrive in Sydney, you get off to clear passport control and customs, and you're pulled aside, and they say, something, we've decided to rescind that special dispensation to you. You're going to have
upon landing, he hears
upon
this?
landing, you're going to have to go into quarantine. So I don't see any way of characterizing this apart from sadism. That was a sadistic action. That was turning the screws on him. And then one of these people that participates in this, I remember one of the most revolted I've ever felt was this BBC reporter in the most condescending, smarmy, repugnant way, then does a struggle session interview with Djokovic. Are you really going to stake your entire career? You could be the greatest ever. You could be the GOAT, Djokovic. Are you really prepared to set all of that aside just so you don't have to receive the vaccine?
Bow down before me and all of this will be yours.
It's true. Well, there you go. All right. So you're seeing where this is headed.
Yes. I saw it then.
Yeah.
Bow down before me and all of this will be yours.
Right.
This is totally the oldest offer there is.
So, I grew up in the Episcopal Church. I didn't really take religion seriously. I mean,
it's not a serious religion. I grew up in it too. I know.
I started getting interested in kind of as a scholarly, the Hellenic Greek in which the Bible's written. I kind of came at it more from a philosophical approach, and the deeply religious concepts were something I hadn't spent a lot of time with. This contrasted me with Dr. McCullough. He's a very religious person, and we're having dinner one night at his house, and he says, "John, how do you explain this?" He said, I don't think, I mean, all these guys like money. Everybody likes money. Money's fun, whatever. But I don't think money is sufficient to explain this.
I agree completely.
He said there must be something else.
This is the fabled red pill when you realize it's not really about bribery. I mean, that is heavy.
Well, let's put it this way. If you trickle down the pyramid, I think a lot of your infantry,
for sure.
They're like, oh, money. You
pay off the guards. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah,
I could use that. But you start getting to the top, to the inner kind of presidium of this thing.
Are they bribing Bill Gates?
Right.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, but what is it?
Right.
What are we bumping up against?
Exactly.
And we can't quite see it. I mean, I remember
I've been obsessed with this for 5 years. All this other stuff is just, these are just symptoms of something very deep.
It's true. So, my first interview with Peter McCullough, a buddy of mine has a studio down not too far from the hospital where he was at the time vice president of internal medicine. Now, he was on the way out, like they were about to scoot him out. No, actually, he'd already lost his job as vice president of internal medicine at Baylor University. He then got a job at what was called Hart Place, which happened to be on the Baylor campus, but a different institution. He was about to lose his job at Hart Place. But at the moment, he was still there as a cardiologist. And he came down to this little studio that belongs to a friend of mine, and we shot this beautiful interview. The lighting, the camera, the audio, I mean, it was just absolute pro. And I removed myself from the interview. It's just like this chiaroscuro lighting on Dr. McCullough. He's wearing a beautifully tailored suit, and he's just on it. I mean, every question, cites all of the peer-reviewed literature, is totally circumspect in everything, every remark, no speculation, just the facts supported by the evidence cited. I put it on my YouTube channel, and the studio, the guy that ran the studio, he had some friends in the independent media that helped to kind of get this thing going. I mean, he distributed the tape to the guys at The Blaze, the guys at, I can't remember, a bunch of independent media podcasters and networks and stuff. So this thing starts to go viral. And I'm thinking, well, this is great. I mean, he spoke very cautiously and he spoke very well. And about 4 hours later, YouTube takes it down with no explanation. So I called Dr. McCullough and I said, we've just bumped into something that is really big and it's really dark. It's like a black hole. Like you know how you see a black hole in space? It's actually light is bending into it. You can't see it through an optical telescope, but what you can see is that the gravitation of the black hole is so strong that it's actually warping time-space so that light is bending into it. I said, it's like we've just bumped into a black hole. We can't see it, but we know it's there. What the hell is it? And so this is actually what began the discussion. And ultimately, I don't see any other conclusion that's plausible. And I'm not saying this is the conclusion. I try and stay within the realm of physics and empirical observation. So I'll ask you, how else could you explain it other than what you just said a moment ago? This appears to be...
No, you go from physics to metaphysics the more you think about it.
That's it. So that's what I told Peter. I said, I think we're going to have to leave the realm of physics and enter the realm of metaphysics, even though it's something I'm not comfortable doing.
Exactly how I think if you grew up Episcopalian, like the one thing you don't want to talk about is, the supernatural. You just don't.
It's true.
It's de-emphasized. It's embarrassing. There's a kind of social stigma to it. Were you handling snakes in your trailer park? I mean, there's just a whole suite of disincentives to even think about stuff like that. It's kind of interesting, but I feel you on this. Yes.
Well, so I grew up in the Bible Belt. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and this was the era in the '80s of a guy named Robert Tilden. He was this completely bizarre charlatan who would speak in tongues, and it would always end every episode by saying, "And by the way, if you send me a check and close a prayer with it, I'll see to it that your prayer is answered." Now, the bigger the check, I'm not saying that, my intercession is necessarily going to be affected by the sum, but, it might well be. So this is the era in which I just complete...
True corruption. Yeah.
Just total charlatans, false prophets, wolves in sheep's clothing, guys who themselves weren't in control of their personal lives, kind of masking all of this, hiding it from themselves with this embrace of religiosity. So, and I remember my mother, who grew up in the Episcopal Church, just saying, this is just the way these guys wear their religion on their sleeves. It's just so unseemly. And so this is what I grew up in.
I know precisely what you're talking about. Yeah.
So,
not our kind of people.
No. So I thought, all right, kind of kicking and screaming, well, let's enter the realm of metaphysics. So what I did was, when I was in graduate school, because he was canonical, I read the novels of Dostoevsky.
Yes.
So I was like, I'm going to have to go back.
You read The Grand Inquisitor in the middle of the Brothers
all right,
K.
All right, so there it is.
Yeah, you read that and you're like, first of all, this is a truly deep culture. This is not a gas station with nuclear weapons.
No.
I mean, this is like, wow.
No, and remember, he himself had done 10 years a hard time.
Yeah, he faced a false execution.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I remember reviewing that and thinking, God, that's hard. It's like 8 months of solitary. Then talk about sadism. Like, talk about Djokovic is, flying first class to Sydney, and then he arrives, and it's like, okay, we have something in store for you. It's like you're going to face death, and then it's called off at the last second. This is just terror.
After marching you all the way from Siberia to Moscow takes like 2 months, and then you get there and like we're going to execute you, and then just kidding.
Yeah.
No, it's heavy.
And then we were talking earlier, like the misery of being separated from women for months on end. Yeah. He's then sent to 6 years of military service in some provincial town inside. It's like we're just not going to end the punishment
Yeah.
for attending some liberal, group of guys talking about the latest ideas out of Germany. Like, we are going to make you really suffer for this. So it's not that Dostoevsky hadn't experienced this on his person. Like,
He had.
he knows what he's talking
Yeah.
about. Okay, so the Grand Inquisitor. So for those of your audience that are this is what I was going to talk. So you're a step ahead of me. So Aloysia, the youngest boy of the brothers Karamazov.
This is a scene within the novel.
Right.
Right.
So he's talking with his brother Ivan, who is the sort of rational empiricist who is reading all these ideas out of France and Germany. I mean, I think it's probably around the year 1860.
Exactly.
So Ivan says, I have a story for you. And I think it's kind of charming. I think it's kind of original. It has a certain flair, and it's almost in a playful way. He says, so, second coming of Christ, he drops down into Sevilla, Spain, in the midst of the Inquisition, the dark days of the Inquisition. He's walking down the street around the old Sevilla Cathedral. He's sort of blessing people, and groups are gathering around him, and oh my goodness, he's returned in Sevilla, Spain, during the Inquisition of all places. Suddenly, the Grand Inquisitor himself is drawn out of his office, goes down to the square in front of the cathedral, and says, arrest that man. Arrest him? Arrest him. He's an imposter. So this is where it has such literary power. So the Inquisitor puts Jesus in jail, and he comes into the cell, and he looks at him and he says, is it really you? And Jesus sort of looks at him, and I think he just simply answers yes or nods. He says, it really is you. This is just remarkable. He says, but I always kind of thought this might happen, and so I have a message for you. I cannot allow you to come walking around on earth, like talking to people. He said, it's not something that we, the church, or the rulers of the church, can allow. And he says, and I'm going to be fair, and I'm going to tell you why. He says, do you remember back when you were presented with these temptations by the opposer?
Do you remember? Yeah.
He says, you see, what he offered to you was the ability to assume responsibility for all of these people, to make rocks into bread and water into wine. And all you had to do was just make the deal, and you could have then assumed all worldly power in order to just take care of these fools, these humans with all of their flaws and their ignorance and their limitations. You could have just taken care of them, but instead you chose to ask of them to maintain their responsibility and their free will. This was an absurd decision that you made. Humanity is not capable of assuming this burden. You asked too much. So what we are going to do is we are going to do the deal that you should have taken. We're going to take care of them. We're going to make sure that they're provided for. And in return, they shall give us their obedience. Because it's obedience that we need in order to run this ship properly. So that's why I'm arresting you, and that's why you're not going to see the light of day under my watch. So it's a great scene. What do you have to say to that? So in the scene, the Grand Inquisitor, Jesus stands up. He walks up to the Inquisitor, and he kisses him. And it's like, it's such a cool scene because this is an old, vain, cynical guy. He's just so accustomed to everything going his way. He doesn't believe in anything anymore. But that kind of melts his heart a little bit. And so he leaves, the Inquisitor then leaves the cell and leaves it open. So anyway, Ivan says, what do you think of my little story? And Aloysia then says, it's kind of interesting. Let me think about it for a moment. I'm happy to see you, brother. I think I have to go. And then Aloysia gives Ivan a kiss. And Ivan says, that's plagiarism. Anyway, I love the scene, but why am I getting kind of a maudlin telling this? There's a reason. I think this is a very plausible explanation. Those who rule this world, there seems to be a perception there are certain things that are non-negotiable. That we just won't accept any resistance. And one of those non-negotiable things is apparently vaccines. Everybody has to get them. No one can question them. He who questions them will be relentlessly persecuted like a heretic.
Is there, you've made the case for that. I believe every word that you have said. I think the last 5 years stands as testimony to the truth of what you said. But we still are eliding the core question, which is there something about vaccines that makes them, really important, the most important thing to the people who run the world? Because it is the world. It's not. It's the world.
It's the whole world.
Right. So whatever this thing is about vaccines has been noted for close to 100 years. I mean, Diego Rivera painted that mural. And what's interesting about it is a funny picture. I agree. And Diego Rivera had very little talent.
By the way, I think the Christ child is a self-portrait.
I'm sure that it is, and he's a ludicrous figure and, got more acclaim than he deserves. But he was, if nothing else, sort of an indicator of what the people in charge thought. He was their sort of pet muralist, right? So they understood then, 90 years ago, that vaccines were at the center of what is it about vaccines? Is it the piercing of the skin, the blood? I mean, is it a kind of ritual? I mean, clearly it is, but is there something inherent about the vaccines?
I think that the entire edifice of our everything that pertains to public health policy, which includes the ability to invoke a public health emergency,
right,
to quarantine people, to put them under house arrest, in effect, under house arrest. I mean, I remember I went to this march in Washington, D.C. in January of 2020 opposing the vaccine mandates, and I wasn't allowed to enter a restaurant in D.C. I couldn't stay in a hotel in D.C. I had to stay in Virginia. So it's a way, I think, this is just one way of looking at it. If you refuse to get injected, I mean, it's kind of the ultimate. I mean, people could say, well, if you come to work, you have to wear a uniform. Or, I mean, there are these different sort of restrictions on personal freedom and personal space that we sort of accept as just sort of part of a reasonable set of expectations to participate in institutional life. But getting injected, and you don't know what's in the injection, you don't really know anything about it. I mean, when you go to get your vaccine or your child vaccinated, the package insert isn't presented to you. There is no informed consent. I mean, it's just the pediatrician says you got to get this for your kid to attend school. So here we go. You've free will contemplation of the reality of this. It's just not even in it. You just agree. So I think it's the ultimate form of obedience. I mean, what could be? I mean, consider that if there's a vaccine mandate, we can lock you up. We can shuffle you off to some shitty hotel in Sydney for 2 weeks. We could prevent you from playing in the tournament. So it's the ultimate method of control.
So it's not, I guess, so you're answering the question, I think, by saying it almost doesn't matter what's in the vaccines or not. It's not inherent to the chemical formulation of the product. It's not that mRNA technology, whatever its effects are, that wasn't necessarily the point. It was the ritual of forcing people to do something against their will without their consent. And once you've done that, you are in control. It's a rape, basically.
Are a kind of inverted communion. You have to take the communion or you can't be a part of this congregation.
Well, in communion itself, I'll say this as a believing Christian, is not, I mean, right? So Jesus said, "This is my body and blood shed for you for the forgiveness of sins. Take this in the remembrance of me." But the human mind cannot understand what that means, but we accept it.
We accept it.
Right. And I think the Catholics call that a holy mystery, maybe, or something to that effect, meaning that the fact that you don't understand it is part of the point. Or acknowledging that you can't understand it is part of the point, and that therein lies its power, right?
It has immense symbolic power, and I think that you participate in communion, and there is a mystery. There's debates and theological circuits. Is it transubstantiation or just symbolic? Or the thing about a vaccine is it's injected into your deltoid muscle, and you don't know what it is. Now, what was particularly so it's the ultimate in terms of your physical body. Never mind the symbolic value of this. It's meaning, and I think meaning is perhaps the ultimate thing that we're seeking in this life. But this is a direct injection into your physical body or that of a very small developing child. So what was really spooky about the COVID-19 vaccine, and remember, there were different iterations of this. There were attenuated vaccines. There were inactivated vaccines, that's to say SARS-CoV-2, cultured and then attenuated or inactivated. But what these guys really, really were interested in was this genetic product, messenger RNA. And I think this is really important. And we go into this in our book. Messenger RNA, the actual molecule, was discovered in the 60s in France. And there's something very important about this that I think goes to the absolute heart of scientists, the long-standing dream. It's the myth of Prometheus or Lucifer. And I actually think that Lucifer should be viewed in some ways as a kind of, he's a close stepbrother of Prometheus in some interpretation. He's a bringer of light. You know, if it weren't for Lucifer, you'd have this dumbass guy and girl sitting around eating mangoes or something, and they'd never awaken to the reality of the world. They would just be stuck kind of, I mean, it sounds kind of nice, just kind of perpetually in love, walking around the garden. But the idea of Lucifer is, no, you have a brain, use it, explore, discover, learn about your limitations. Maybe you can even transcend your limitation. So I think that's the idea of Lucifer, the bringer of light. Now, I'm not saying that Lucifer is a great guy. I'm saying this is, I think, part of this scientific archetype to transcend the limitations of our mortality. So now you ask, what about these guys in Silicon Valley? The masters of the universe now. I mean, the electronic world that we wouldn't be having this conversation if it weren't for the great lords of technology in Palo Alto or Menlo Park or whatever. So I think that a lot of those guys, you might say, and I don't say this to criticize them, I just think it's a description. You might say that they're suffering from Luciferian pride. It's pride that, I have discovered the way the universe works. I can take electrons and create a picture and send a picture. It's almost like magic. And I actually know a professional electrician, and you can ask him about electricity. And I'll ask him a complex question, and he'll say, well, I would characterize that as that's a FM frequency. I was like, well, what do you mean FM? Like frequency modulation? He says, no, that's what we call in electricity fucking magic. I mean, there are certain things about our use of electricity that it's just remarkable. So,
but it's opaque even to the people who know the most about it,
yes,
right? So this was actually, and I went and looked this up because I'm very interested in electricity and what exactly it is. And there was a huge debate in the United States at the time of electrification, not like TVA electrification, but 19th century. Edison popularizes the light bulb. All of a sudden, it's amazing. No more oil lamps. We can stop killing the sperm whales. All this stuff. It's like great. But there were people in the United States, sane people, and a lot of them were Christian clergy, who were asking questions, and you can look it up. Like, what is this exactly? And of course, none of them ever got a straightforward answer. And to this day, no one can really answer that question. What is this exactly? Because no one really knows exactly what it is. I'm not attacking electricity. I'm just noticing. And I just find it so interesting that you can like base your whole civilization on this thing, but nobody, even like a master electrician, can explain every part of it, right? So who's in charge? The reason that's interesting is because if you don't fully understand something, are you really its master?
Right. Right. So, but this idea, yes, we don't, and I think, so I'm going to come back to messenger RNA, but what I want to say about the great lords of tech is I recently had the great privilege of meeting one personally, and I really liked him. He was a brilliant man, a stunning intellect. And I've long admired him. It was a confidential meeting, but I have long admired him. I've read his biography. I think he's a miraculous guy. I mean, in terms of intellect.
I suspect I know him. Yep.
But what struck me during our conversation, in which he couldn't have been more gracious and polite, was, and this is my subjective perception, and I was with Dr. McCullough in the meeting. There's nothing we could possibly tell this man that he doesn't already know. He already knows everything. It doesn't matter how much Dr. McCullough has studied and observed and has worked 16-hour days examining all this. This very distinguished, very impressive man, he already knows it.
Okay, now I know who you're talking about. Because there's like one person I know like this. Yes.
He already knows everything. And one of the things he knows is that vaccines are safe and effective. Yeah. So, again, we're back to these axiomatic things. It's just,
and you believed that he sincerely believed that?
I think he did. I mean, I think he has some interests in believing that. I mean, it's probably not just intellectual intrigue that has caused him to believe this.
Can I say one thing about that? It's too simple to say that when people have conflicts like the one you're describing, if in fact that's a real conflict, it's too simple to say it's only about the money. There is a phenomenon that I have lived personally over decades where if you're too close to something and you're benefiting from it and you like it, it's not about money. If you like it, if you like the world you live in, which I did, it's very hard, maybe impossible to see its real character.
It's true. You're in it. You're swimming in it.
And you know everyone in it and you like them.
Yeah.
And it's not just like they're paying you to say nice things about them, as you like these people. They can't be part of something. You just, whatever they're part of, you can't fully see it. That's all I'm saying.
You can't. And you know, something that has been a matter of great controversy and strife and anger and high emotion that has come up in public discourse recently is the ancient anthropological constant of tribalism. Tribalism. And if you're not a tribalist, if you don't see the world in terms of tribe, then, and I beg your pardon for being academic again, but I think Wittgenstein, the great linguistic philosopher, would have said, you don't understand the conversation. In other words, tribalists, guys who hate each other and are involved in reprisals and this kind of zero sum, you know, race to the bottom. Well,
Albanian mountain feuds. Yeah.
Serbs versus Croatians.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I went sailing down on the Dalmatian coast, pulled into a gas station just north of Dubrovnik to get some gas for my car, and I walked into this gas station, and the whole gas station was like a shrine to the villainy of the Serbs. There's a Croatian guy just north of Dubrovnik, Croatia.
Like Slobodan Milosevic posters or something?
Well, okay. To be fair, some lunatic Serbian artillery guy had actually direct hit on his gas station. So, okay, all right, I get it. You know, back during the Yugoslav war, and why these jerks decide to shell Dubrovnik? It's like one of them. I mean, it's like, what do you guys? Clearly, these guys had just completely lost their minds. Yeah. Why are you shelling Dubrovnik? Why did you just? Okay, a gas station. Okay, all right. So just blow the shit out of that gas station.
Yeah.
So, you know, here we are, like 26 years later, and the whole gas station is a shrine to Serbian villainy. So can you imagine every day walking in to your place of work and there is everywhere on the wall a reminder of the injustice that you suffered 26 years ago at the hands of the Serbs. So this was fascinating. I was like, I got to talk to this dude. So he spoke broken German. Some of the Croatians from the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, they can still speak a bit of German. And I said, why do you believe that they shelled Dubrovnik? Like, that doesn't really make sense. Like, what is the strategic value of shelling Dubrovnik? It's just like a World Heritage site, you know? It's
right.
He looks at me, he says, what reason? He says, there is no reason in these monsters. They're insane. They're deranged. They're demonic. There's no reason in and he's furious. It's like, it's just, can you imagine?
I can picture this scene, yes.
Yeah. So it's hard for me, somebody I don't have a tribal allegiance. I mean, you could say, well, you know, I have a kind of sentimental affection for my English ancestors.
Right.
You know, I think I related to Sir John Leake I think he was Queen Anne's admiral during the War of Spanish Succession. So, and there's a book about Sir John, and, you know, I've read the book and it's like, well, he sounds like a cool guy, but the trials and travails of his struggle in the War of Spanish Succession, I mean, it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
So I can't get into the internal logic of this conversation about, you know, this tribe did this and then that, and then we're back and forth, and who killed more than the other guy. And
would you say it's true that people without a tribal identity are at grave disadvantage against those with a powerful tribal identity because they don't understand what they're looking at all?
You don't understand what you're looking at.
No.
I don't understand what
I
I'm looking
totally
at.
agree. I have exactly the same views. Maybe it's the Episcopal Church taught us this or something, but yes.
Well, I remember before my grandfather died, he fought in Italy. He, slept on the ground for 2 years, and he slung it out with Jerry in Italy. I mean, like hot combat. And my great uncle, Bobby Weitzel, was killed in Italy, and it was very traumatic to my great grandmother. But the thing and my great grandmother, by the way, her family was originally from Germany, so there was this kind of confusion about that. And I remember talking to my grandfather, and he said, one of the most disturbing things I remember, he said, there's a machine gun nest, and we kind of were able to maneuver and get close, and somebody tossed a grenade into it, and the grenade went off, and then the guns fell silent. And he said, so then we entered the machine gun nest, and the soldier manning it was just a boy. He didn't even have a beard. He was like a 14-year-old. And he said the Germans were moving all of their manpower to the Eastern Front.
Always, yeah.
To fight the Russians. And so they had just pulled back these positions in northern Italy, north of Florence, and they were very clever. He said they kind of set these things up where just a little kid could operate it. He said, and they had these fascinating little maps, and then you could actually, with a lever, you could identify with binoculars where are the Americans, and then you could move a corresponding lever to put the gun, to sight the gun. He said it's very ingenious. He said, but I remember thinking, this is just friggin' awful.
It's awful.
It's like a little kid. And this was my
Only the United States would do that, though. I think, and this might be wrong, but it's correct-ish. I think in 1941, December, when the war started, the largest ethnic group in the United States was German.
Yeah.
I think that was if you ask people, what's your ancestry? I think German was number one, maybe number two after English, but it was right up there. And the whole country, so what other country, which is fine, I'm very anti-Hitler, okay, but where else in history could you say to a population, go fight your distant relatives in the land of your ancestors and have them go do it? Only in a country where tribal identity had been discouraged to the point where it disappeared.
Completely.
Right? And by the way, that also happened in the First World War,
right,
where millions of Americans of German ancestry changed their last names, called themselves Dutch. The Pennsylvania Dutch are obviously German, but they were so ashamed of their own tribe that they pretended they weren't part of that tribe. And I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying I don't think that's ever happened in history.
No. The American adventure or project has been unbelievably successful until I don't know, 2000.
Yep.
So why do I mention war and tribalism and all of this? If you're in the vaccine ideology and you've completely 100% been indoctrinated in it, it's like I can't talk to you. It's like you're in another tribe. And I think that is perhaps the point of the whole thing. Let's divide. Let's stamp out vaccine hesitancy, and then those who take the communion, who receive, the boy who receives, those who receive it will then be permanently separate from those who are hesitant and refuse. So it's like you've just created a tribal identity. And he who hesitates, he who refuses, well, if he's in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, he can't stay in a hotel. He can't have a steak dinner with Senator Johnson near Capitol Hill because he's not vaccinated. So I think that's what this is about. But I want to get, we might be running short on time, but I do want to talk about messenger RNA. So this Promethean or Luciferian intellect and the pride that is taken in that. there's no grander expression of this than messenger RNA. So the original idea was, well, if you think about messenger RNA, there's a trinity of the way proteins, the building blocks of life, or proteins. Okay, so there's replication, which is a DNA strand replicates itself. There's transcription, which is the DNA using RNA, which is 1/2 DNA strand, to send information outside of the cell nucleus into the external part of the cell, the sort of watery part of the cell. RNA then instructs, that's called transcription, and then translation, that RNA instruction then tells the cell what to do. And I mean, it's like you're talking about electricity. I mean, if you start studying molecular biology, you think, oh my God, like this is so fascinating. It's so interesting. Like, and Francis Collins, who's the head of the NIH when COVID came, he wrote a book in 2006. Do you remember this book, Francis Collins?
Of course not. No, I was not even aware he existed until COVID. All of this went way under my radar.
So Francis Collins wrote a book called The Language of God. And what he claimed was, with the Human Genome Project, with all the advances that had been made in understanding molecular biology, DNA, RNA, messenger RNA, that scientists were reading the code in which God had created life. So you're probably wondering why I mentioned the Silicon Valley guys. So code, you code things. You enter a code, you transmit the code, and then that initiates an operation, an instruction to do something. And we're headed this way in a big way with artificial intelligence. But the idea is, it's like God is a divine coder, and using nucleic acid, he coded up there in the celestial, I don't know, the celestial laboratory, he coded life. And now the human intellect has reached a point where we can read the code. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, so I read the book, God's Language. That's cool. I mean, maybe we're reading God's language. I think Einstein said, I want to know God's thoughts. Okay, so far so good. But what these mRNA vaccine guys did, they went one step further. We're not only going to read the language of God, we're going to start writing in the language of God using messenger RNA. We will now use pseudo-uridinated messenger RNA to instruct the body to produce the proteins, the building blocks of life, that we want it to produce.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong?
I think now it's just good to interject in one sentence and remind everyone that Adam and Eve were not expelled from the garden for ignorance.
Right. Well,
just the opposite.
Right. But now, okay, I'm glad that you raised this, because now we come to a point that I think lies at the heart of the human condition. How do we recognize? So we are curious. I mean, when I was a boy, my mother said, "You know, your problem is you're so curious. Like if somebody tells you can't look at something, the first thing you do is look at it. Somebody tells you don't go onto that piece of property, well then, next minute you're climbing over the gate. I mean, it's like, what is it about telling us you can't look into that?
Yeah, just one piece of fruit you can't have. That's it. Otherwise, you're set. It's like it's perfect, but you just can't have this one thing.
But consider the contradiction of that, because to go back to The Grand Inquisitor by Ivan Karamazov, it's a paradox, because in a way what the Grand Inquisitor is suggesting is just give us all of your free will, and we'll take care of you. It's like we're going back to the prelapsarian state where you're just taken care of. You don't have to ask any questions. You don't have to try and figure anything out. You're just told the way the world is, and you accept and you obey. So this is the tension in being human. And the messenger RNA stuff, where the whole thing becomes so fantastically absurd, and this is another really important point that we try to convey in our book. There's so much these guys don't know. So they get these little glimmers of insight. It's like, holy Toledo, can you believe what we just observed? Where it becomes very childish and very intellectually challenged is the next thought, oh, now we've figured it all out. Now we can assume the helm.
Yes, that's right.
It's like, why do you, just on the face of it, that's preposterous. Like, you just figured something out. You just got a glimpse of something. You need to recognize what that's telling you is how much you don't know. You don't know. There's so many things you don't know.
But the irony is that the scientific process, science, is designed as a counterbalance to those very human instincts. I know something, therefore I'm an expert. That's called hubris. And the process itself is, again, designed to rein that in, to show you how much you don't know. That's the whole thing. So how did that not work?
My favorite medical historian is Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., a very, very interesting guy. And he once made an observation, which I've thought, God, if you could just frame that, put it on the wall of every library, of every laboratory. He said, science is the topography of ignorance.
Exactly.
From a few elevated points, we triangulate vast spaces of unknowns. So that is a person who's actually using his head. He's actually thinking. He's not just saying, oh, look how smart we are. Look at all of this brilliant stuff that we just discovered. Now let's start making 1,000 assumptions that are totally unwarranted.
I'm going to ask you one last specific question about messenger RNA. So I think, as you said a number of times, we don't really know its effects, and we don't know certainly where it's going long term. But the one thing it strikes me we should be very concerned about is the possibility that it changes people in a way that they pass on to their children, that it changes their genetic code. Because that's, of course, destroying humanity as we know it. Is there any indication that that is happening or could happen?
Yes. There are a few things that I would say to that. The first highly alarming thing is there is evidence that it actually impairs fertility. So that's perhaps a paradox. It's actually preventing you from passing anything on to your kids because you're not having them. So that's one thing. The second,
and there's real evidence of that.
Yes. Yes.
So how in the world is it still legal in the United States to inject people with that?
Well, fertility is just the start of it. How about...
That's all I need to know. That's all I need to know, and that's almost enough to make you think, we have to stop this now.
For sure. Well, Peter McCullough has been proclaiming this for a while.
No, but for real. You can't have that.
Right.
Okay. Sorry. I'm trying to get my emotions under control, but yeah, that's really...
I'll tell you something else when you talk about young people, so fertility. In July of 2021, the New England Journal of Medicine, to their credit, published a peer-reviewed case study of a young man, an adolescent boy, who developed myocarditis, inflammation of the heart. Now consider the symbolism of this. A young, fit boy develops myocarditis, inflammation of the heart, shortly after receiving a messenger RNA COVID shot. I actually had dinner with Dr. McCullough that night. He was very alarmed by this. He said, I've been practicing cardiology for 30 years. I very, very rarely see myocarditis. And this preposterous assertion that, well, it's just a little bit of heart damage. He said, this is ridiculous. You need your heart to keep beating every second or millisecond for the rest of your days. That poor muscle, you can't afford to damage
There's
it.
no minor damage to your
No,
heart. Right.
no. So he said, this is really a disaster. And so what is the reasonable thing to automatically recognize in the summer of 21? It's very simple. We already know, we're over a year into this, that young athletes are not at risk of severe COVID illness. They're just not. It has zero statistical significance as a purported threat to the health of young athletes. And I might add, young athletes are kind of the hope. I mean, they're sort of, not that they're athletes, but that they're young and strong and have full possession of their abilities and faculties. And those are the young fellas that are going to perpetuate our civilization.
That's our country, right?
That's our country. Precisely. So why would you do anything? Why would you take any unnecessary risk that could damage young people? Okay, you could say in a nursing home, our risk-benefit analysis is that, take the risk with the vaccine because these people are very frail if they get... And we could argue that. Maybe we should have a discussion. But just to say all the young boys and little girls should get this shot even though they're not at risk of COVID-19.
It's the opposite. It's the most unnatural thing ever because the progression of nature is really simple. You go through phases in life. And at a certain point, that's all you care about. I'm only 56. I already don't care about me at all. And I mean that. Not because I'm so selfless. I'm not selfless. But because it's just natural. At a certain point, you pivot from worrying about you to worrying about your children and your grandchildren, what comes after you. That's the life cycle. Animals are this way. This is the most natural thing ever. And when that's subverted, then it's from hell.
It's true. So it gets dark. So, Doctor...
It gets darker? I don't know if I can handle it.
I mean, that's dark, but it's about to get darker. So the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, who's also an adjunct professor at the Harvard Medical School. So in terms of institutional prestige, it doesn't get any more prestigious. I mean, you're talking about number one public medical professional probably on earth. Professor at Harvard, editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine. I mean, that's like the Pope. His name is Dr. Eric Rubin, and he was also an advisor on the FDA deliberative committee to decide whether we should approve the messenger RNA COVID-19 vaccine for young people. I think the original decision is people under the age of 18. We have the transcript of the deliberative committee meeting. And the question is, should the FDA, and in effect, he's the most prestigious advisor in the room, should it be approved for young people? So this is his reasoning. And I just quote the transcript. Okay, so the question is, do we approve this for young people? He says two things. First of all, the risk-benefit analysis is different from what it is for older people. And he doesn't need to spell this out. Everybody understands. Is older people seem to be at greater risk of getting into trouble with the illness itself. So, yeah, we have a different risk-benefit profile when it comes to young people. Now, that's a euphemism. I mean, there's a big difference in the risk-benefit profile. Young people aren't at risk of this at all. And we have something else. We have a signal. He said, I'm not sure if it's 100% real, but I think that it is. He's referring to myocarditis in young people. So the signal, I believe, is real. So you have a bad safety signal, and then you have, in terms of the risk of the illness for young people, it's nil. So he said, so it's a tough decision. But I think in the final analysis, we won't really know until we just start giving it. So
Rubin said that.
those are his exact words.
So how was he punished for that?
That's the orthodoxy. He's
So not punished.
no. I mean, it's like
How could you show your face after saying something like that?
I don't know.
As like someone atop, the public health infrastructure in America, how could you?
And so
So there was no professional shame attached to him for that.
Well,
he wasn't sanctioned by anybody or fired.
To be clear, there's still the FDA and the CDC technically acknowledge that a adverse side effect of the COVID-19 vaccine is myocarditis, particularly in adolescent males. Okay, but that is so qualified with the assertion, but it's so rare that we needn't really concern ourselves with it. It's a very low risk outcome. So that is the assertion in order to prevent there from being any repercussion. Now, Senator Ron Johnson held a Senate hearing in May of this year. I actually attended with Dr. McCullough. And the question was, has myocarditis been deliberately obscured, the risk? Has it been covered up by the U.S. government? The same agencies who approved it for young people? And the answer is yes. And I think that this is very, very important. There isn't going to be a public acknowledgement from this same group of guys that they've made catastrophic errors in all of this. That will never be admitted. It will never be acknowledged. It won't.
Well, then you have at that point no moral authority, no credibility, and you can't continue in the same way that you did before. Like normal people will say, I'm not listening to a word you say. I'm not going to the doctor. That's where I am personally, but it's not just me. It's like any person who thinks about this. It's like, how could I ever believe you again?
Do you remember what I was saying earlier about a large percentage swath of the American people no longer believe anything their government agencies tell them? It's the same.
And mRNA vaccines are still being given to young people right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. I don't want to marinate in rage because it's not good for me, and I don't think it doesn't elevate the conversation. But let me just circle back to the original question, just to make sure we settle it. Do you think there's evidence that the changes to people, to their genetic structure wrought by these vaccines could be passed on to their children?
The McCullough Foundation, of which I am the vice president, we just published, I should say, we did an exposition of a paper that was recently published in which a patient, it's a published paper, it's a published case study. It's not a question of speculation, it's been published. Now, molecular biologists, I'm sure, could debate about this, but the finding is a person who had cancer of the bladder, which is a very severe cancer, in that tumor, so in the bladder cells that had become dysplastic, that when cancer begins to develop, remember I was telling you about the coding, you get coding errors and it starts forming these malignant cells which are chaotic and that don't work, but they keep replicating. That's the problem with cancer. It's like this dysfunctional thing that just keeps replicating. It's kind of a horror show. Now, I don't pretend to be an oncologist, but the finding is that messenger RNA was found in the cancerous cells of this tumor. So it seems to be integrating. Now, the question is it integrating in a way that can be passed on to the offspring, or is it so dysfunctional that it's killing the host before it can be passed on? And I don't know that we yet know that. But remember, the science is the topography of ignorance. I mean, there's a lot about this that is very, very concerning. There's also a study that this messenger RNA seems to have transcribed into liver cells. So, you know, to really get to the bottom of this, you would have to have molecular biologists who aren't entranced by this, that would have to really be willing to seriously evaluate it without presuppositions. And I just don't know that we're there. That's the problem where we are. It's if you received the vaccine, if you approved it, if you told your patients they need to get it, are you really going to be, and unless you have a kind of Damascene moment where you're like, okay, I totally screwed all of this up. Like 100%, I'm an idiot. All of my assumptions were wrong. But there aren't very many people
with decency or integrity in medicine.
don't think-
Apparently not. Apparently there aren't.
I don't think so.
I don't think these are complex concepts at all. They're very human concepts. There's nobody who hasn't screwed it up and learned that his preconceptions were wrong and that he's given terrible advice or hurt people unwittingly. There's not one person who's past 14 years old who hasn't had that experience, and it is incumbent on us. It's our obligation to admit that. And like, if people with the power of life and death, physicians, can't admit that, then we need to eliminate the profession. You can't have that. That's the one thing you can't have. Dishonesty, lack of concern for other people, like, not acceptable. Where's the AMA?
So get a load of this story. Why did I become interested in this whole story of medicine and doctrine, medicine and false orthodoxy? This goes back to when I lived in Vienna. I lived in Vienna for many years as a true crime author. I became interested in
Sorry, your life story, which we haven't gotten into, but I would encourage people to look it up. So you start as a German-speaking philosopher and you wind up as a true crime author. I just love the course of people's lives. It's so amazing.
Well, I mean, talk about money. I mean, one, and the power of money to direct people's attention. So I think I would have liked to have been a philosopher. Two things happen. I didn't like hanging around with academics, and B, I don't mind not being rich, but I didn't like being poor.
Oh, I hosted Fox and Friends weekends for 4 years, so I know what it means to have to make certain compromises to pay the bills. So I get it.
So I got interested in forensic medicine, and I got to be pals with the pathologist, the forensic doctor at the Vienna Institute of Forensic Medicine. And she wanted to get some of her papers published in English. And she said, I know the basic medical terms, but I don't know how to write in a good, nice, flowing style. This was before all these translate things. So, I'll do my basic translation. I'll make sure the medical terminology is correct, but could you put this into a paper that somebody might want to actually read? So I did a few translations for her, and I got to be pals with her. And I got to where I was hanging out at the Vienna Institute of Forensic Medicine, once every couple of months when I was researching my first book. And I became so fascinated. I even thought about writing a screenplay about this. So there was a professor of anatomy at the University of Vienna Medical School in the 1840s. And I'm sorry that his name is suddenly slipping me, but he was an anatomy professor. And every day he took his students to the Institute of Forensic Medicine for anatomy class. They would do anatomical studies of cadavers. And then from the anatomy class, the students would then go to the obstetrics department of the University of Vienna Medical School. And there, the head of obstetrics was a guy named Professor Ignaz Semmelweis. Okay, so the year is 1848.
A pivotal year on the continent.
Right. So think about a revolution. It's interesting. So was it 48? It might have been 46. Anyway, 1846, 47, or 48. Semmelweis is pals with the professor of anatomy. The professor of anatomy is doing a demonstration, is using a scalpel on a cadaver, and then accidentally cuts himself. That injury, that wound, then becomes horribly infected, and he dies. He gets sepsis, and he dies. Semmelweis starts thinking, that's interesting, because the disease progression with the professor, it reminds me of what these girls in the maternity ward are suffering. It's called childbed fever.
Exactly.
Might there be a connection? Now remember, this is before the germ theory of medicine. I think an Italian had proposed it, but it hadn't caught on. So Semmelweis says, could it be that the corruption that is transferred from the cadaver to my friend with the scalpel, that the students, they're coming directly here from anatomy, could it be they're transferring the same corruption from the body to the genital tracts of my girls in the maternity ward? Could it be that if I have them wash their hands with chlorinated lime, it's what gravediggers or undertakers use to cut putrefaction, what'll happen? So he tells the kids, wash your hands with chlorinated lime before you examine the girls in my maternity ward. So let's test your powers of deductive reasoning. What happened to the incidence of childbed fever in the maternity ward when they started washing their hands?
I'm thinking it fell.
It fell. It fell almost to zero, from 20% to damn well close to zero. So Semmelweis says, well, that's it. I mean, let's just have the kids wash their hands. So he publishes his study. He does an analysis of 2 different maternity wards. He does a nice comparative case series study. What do you think the eminences of Europe, the medical universities, Vienna, Paris, Stockholm, what did they say? How did they greet Semmelweis's seminal study?
With cheering and tears of gratitude?
Is that what you believe?
No, because I know people. They said, that's fish tank cleaner. That's horse tranquilizer. How dare you? And then they went on CNN to denounce him.
They said, you're crazy.
Yeah.
You've been infected with a deranged superstition. Everybody knows it's got nothing to do with that. You're just putting stupid ideas into the heads of your young and naive students. Stop it. So Semmelweis says, no, I'm not going to stop it. I'm going to continue researching this, and I'm going to continue publishing this. So this turns into a battle royale in Europe. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, Oliver Wendell Holmes is doing the same at the exact same time. I mean, I don't know, maybe they heard of each other. He's doing it at Harvard, and Holmes, is not getting a bunch of blowback at Harvard, but Semmelweis in Vienna is. Okay, so this is how badly this escalates. And remember this, it'd be useful to remember given the current climate of things. So the eminences of Europe say, we have to silence this guy. Semmelweis then starts firing back. You guys at this point have reached a moment where you actually know that I'm telling the truth. Like the reality is the evidence has now come in. It's so strong that you know I'm telling the truth. But you would rather than adopt my protocol of hand washing. You would rather that young moms, young mothers, and their infants in maternity wards all over the continent of Europe, you would prefer that they die rather than admit you're wrong.
Wow, man.
So you know what the response was to him? You're a dangerous lunatic, and we're having a court in Vienna declare you insane, and we're going to put you in the Vienna Insane Asylum. They admit him.
Is this a true story?
This is a true story. His wife says to him, I don't see, with all due respect, dear husband, I don't see how you can be right when all of these medical eminences are wrong. So she leaves him.
No way.
He's completely forsaken. He's put in a mental asylum or insane asylum. There's actually an insane asylum that still stands in Vienna. It's called the Narrenturm, the Tower of Fools. It still exists, by the way. It's very interesting. Remember the end of Amadeus, the film where Salieri's being wheeled out? He's in the Narrenturm. Yeah. Anyway, so I don't think that Semmelweis is in the Narrenturm. I think he's at a facility in the Vienna, somewhere out in the Vienna woods. A guard strikes him with something. We don't know if it was a blunt object. We don't know if it was a sharp object. He gets an infection and he dies in an insane asylum.
No.
It's a true story.
And how long was it until he was posthumously vindicated?
I think Robert Koch in Germany in the 1870s vindicated him.
1870s? Mm-hmm. So decades.
So consider this. When we talk about you're up against censorship and you're up against the imposition of falsehood, and no matter what you say, you're just going to be told to shut up, shut up, shut up.
I'm familiar with that, yes.
It may be 30 years.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, we may be all gone before. So I'll give you another example. Smoking, tobacco. So I know you like to smoke in your younger days, and my mother will hold this against me, but when I lived in Europe, I enjoyed an occasional cigarette.
Well, to be clear, I've never stopped liking smoking. I love it. But no, I realize it has health effects that are bad.
So the question was, in the 1920s and 30s in Germany, is there a link between long-term use of tobacco and carcinoma of the lung, cancer of the lung? And, here's where you have to be really particular. So it's not that everyone who smokes is going to get lung cancer. It's not true. But could it be that in some cases, among some of the population, there's an underlying susceptibility, and if that susceptibility is activated by years of heavy cigarette smoking, could in that susceptible population, could it cause carcinoma of the lung? There was an epidemiologist in Germany named Fritz Linkett, and he did a meta-analysis of all of the data from pathologists to doctors to everybody you could talk to that had ever made any observations on this, and he concluded, yes, not in everybody, but in a statistically significant, susceptible part of the population, cigarette smoking causes carcinoma of the lung. So that's 1930. Okay.
And what year did the Surgeon General's warning appear on Camel cigarettes?
I think
1964.
64. So
that's quite a spread.
So Sir Austin Bradford Hill was probably the most famous epidemiologist of all time. And we have these Bradford Hill criteria of evaluating causation. So in 1950, he does a landmark study, and he concludes, yes, again, not everybody, but in a susceptible population, smoking causes carcinoma of the lung. In spite of his prestige, the tobacco industry, all of its hired gun doctors, and the tobacco industry did have hired gun doctors, that was systematically obscured for another 16 years. So when interests are at stake, don't expect acknowledgement of error.
It's all shocking, but as I think the amazing story you just told reminds us, we should not be shocked, because this is how people are and how always have been. And even if the recognition you receive for telling the truth is posthumous or doesn't come at all, it doesn't matter, because it's a virtue in itself to tell the truth. And that's why I'm grateful for the book you wrote with Peter McCullough, and I'm grateful for this conversation, which was like twice as compelling as what I expected. So thank you.
Thank you.
You don't need to be an economist to see what's happening. The dollar is in trouble. It's getting weaker. It's sad, but we're not in charge of it. So we have to respond appropriately in ways to protect our families. When paper money dies, it's going to be replaced by programmable digital currency or gold. Gold survives. The same Americans who think they're protecting themselves with gold are the ones getting ripped off by big gold dealers. After we left corporate media, we got offered tens of millions of dollars to promote gold companies. How'd they get the money to spend that much on marketing? Because they're scamming their customers. We didn't want anything to do with that. So we sought an honest broker, and together we formed a precious metals company that you can actually trust. It's called Battalion Metals. At BattalionMetals.com, we publish actual spot prices. We're totally transparent about the VIG, what we take, and we treat everyone with honesty. So if you've been watching what's happening, you know it's not just about money, it's about sovereignty and holding something that endures and cannot be manipulated or taken from you. So if you've been waiting for the right time to act, this is it. Visit BattalionMetals.com.